called Trumpty Dumpty. But see, you have to understand, unhealed people don't hear with their ears. They hear with their triggers. Every time we walk in a room and they see us, their triggers go off. They see dark skin and they get scared. It must be something about us that they're afraid of. And I believe it's rooted in what an Orkin man told me one time. He said, Reverend, the only reason I have a job is because we can't get rid of that cockroach. We keep coming. They couldn't hear Jesus. They got triggered by his Jewishness. He preached to ears that refused to hear him, but he kept preaching all the way to Calvary. And his first words from the cross was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He could have called 10,000 angels to stand by his side, but he decided to die to save a wretch like me. And I'm so glad that he saved my soul. I'm so glad he made me whole. I'm so glad that I can look in the mirror and like who I see. Ain't nothing wrong with your color. The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice, the nappier the hair, the more the whole a comb. Ain't nobody like us. I like being black. I'm so glad I'm black, I don't know what to do. Because you know what? Can't nobody walk like us when we broke. We are some colorful people. We need to recognize our strength. Because if we're still here, that says we're very strong. And all the stuff they do to try to wipe us out, it never works. Because we know how to sing a way out of it. We know how, we've been blessed by Aretha Franklin when she said, I don't want nobody always sitting around me and my man. We like Lattimore. Let's straighten it out.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host and presenter Judak Stories, and I'm hoping that you are doing super great from wherever you're watching us from. Now, sometimes you sit down and look at the magnitude of how our ancestors, what our ancestors went through, and what even some black people are going through in the contemporary United States of today. People don't understand, or people don't realize the power, the resilience that black people have, even to show up in some spaces that were predominantly known to be white spaces. What do I mean? Do you know that in the United States, it takes a black person to work 4 times as harder as white person for them to see them in the same platform, right? Publicly, especially places that are usually known. This really reflects how fear sometimes comes in the face of white people. Why am I saying so? I'm saying so because imagine if black people had the same opportunity as white people, looking back from history. Well, I know some people will come and argue that, no, there's nothing like racism. Stop talking about that. If you work hard in the United States, you'll get everything. Yes, that's what the United States wants you to think. It wants you to think that meritocracy is something that works. But however, within the rigged system, black people have showed resilience over time. Why am I saying so? After all these years of prejudice, after these years of mass incarceration, we are still seeing black people coming up. And that didn't stop them from starting Black Wall Street. That didn't stop them from having all those places like Tulsa, Oklahoma. But look at this. They still went ahead and took this down. They still destroyed this down. And this is a reflection of what is called white fear. Right now, I want to introduce this video to you. It is really important for us to talk about this, and any black person watching this thinking that they are giving up, not knowing their power. There is power in black people, and I really hope and wish if black people could just know this. Look, I don't want to say much. If you're watching us for the first time, kindly consider subscribing to the channel and join our membership and really get to see what we can offer you. Let's get into the video. I'll be back and then I'll be sharing my thoughts at the end of it all.
Are you a racist? You can't call me or any black person any place in the world a racist. We don't have the power to do to white people what white people have done to us. And even if we did, we don't have that low-down, dirty nature.
So do you believe there are any good white people?
If there are, I haven't met them. Where are they?
Well, I believe that Ibrahim Traoré is the perfect example of why the American establishment does not want African Americans to see their liberation as intimately intertwined with the liberation of the African people. Because what are just some benefits that African Americans could receive from a liberated, united Africa? Imagine a liberated, united Africa being able to tell the U.S., hey, sure, we'll allow you access to these resources that you want so badly. However, you have to do X, Y, Z for your African American and black community. You want our copper and gold? Okay, yeah. So let's talk about housing for black people. Imagine that Africa has control over its resources. It is overflowing with wealth. And it is like, hey, African Americans, black people of the world, if you feel that you are mistreated as a population in your country, you could have a new home here. But they want African Americans to be isolated from black people outside of empire, because it makes us easier prey to exploit. In the reality that they've created, if resources is money and money is power, who would have more power than the African continent? To empower Africa is to empower all black people around the world, and they know this.
The world as we know is gradually becoming something else. It has become, but it's becoming another thing. If you watch closely to what is happening around, and then you see for yourselves that the only way out for the melanated beings is unity, is togetherness. We just have to come together and pull away all this apathy, all this hate amongst ourselves, which they stir up. You heard that? They create chaos and capitalize on the chaos. We have to quietly try our best to tolerate one another, to foster unity.
That's because in Oakland, California, the Black Panther Party launched a free lunch program to feed the children in the communities because they were going to school hungry. You know, and they worked. And that's what it was all about, just all of us working together. How do you destroy that? Put a black face on the TV screen and have everybody look at the black face and say, oh, that person's a part of our community. So the story they're telling must be right. No, they just got paid to fabricate. They got paid to lead you in a way that's going to frustrate your community.
Is there any solutions? Like, is there, and cause we know all the problems, we know all the issues, everybody woke. What do black people in America do?
Here's the situation. Until we hate racism more than we hate each other, nothing's going to change. See, our problem is totally mental. We're $1 trillion people. We got all the degrees we need, all the expertise. But you know what we're lacking? That cultural commitment to ourselves. We're the only group who don't have it.
I was going to say that it almost feels like before we could fight racism, we have to fight self-hate.
Yeah. You're going to have a civil war.
Because we don't necessarily support ourselves. You know,
Not at all.
We don't help each other.
Martin Luther King didn't get killed because of I had a dream. He had something else he was going to talk about, black empowerment, economic empowerment. When I did the Forbes and I showed them the $890 million receipt and they still didn't say billionaire, they don't want us to know that we can buy land. They don't want us to have the 100% ownership. And the reason why I say these things out loud in this way is so I won't be killed. I said it out loud already. This is what. But last year, I was killed by the press for having a difference. Not having a difference in opinion, for having an opinion. When y'all read the headlines, Kanye's crazy, this is that, this, that. It's like 1 in 3 African Americans are in jail. And all the celebrities are in jail also, because they can't say nothing. They have no opinion. They're so scared.
Don't kill me. But I feel like that whole fight for civil rights movement that they depict during Black History Month and throughout history in itself is a microaggression. Because we're fighting to be equal, but what do we find to be equal to? Not our oppressors. Not the individuals that didn't want to educate us, so we have to educate ourselves. Not the individuals that didn't want to fund us, so we have to fund ourselves. Not the individuals that couldn't protect us, so we have to protect ourselves. Couldn't want to have been like those individuals. Because why would we even want to do that when we did everything that they didn't want us to do, and we're still better off than them, in a sense? Which is why they resort to more so violence than anything else. So to sit in these schools and put in these textbooks that although slavery was bad, you guys fought tooth and nail to be a part of us and be one with us, in itself is an insult. Because fuck is we talking about? I know my ancestors, descendants of kings and queens, royalty, didn't fight, didn't die in a sense to be a second-class citizen, if that. And with what we know about history, about certain things being watered down and certain things being hyped up, I just feel like their interpretation wasn't the actual reality. But it's funny, because you see how they hype up the civil rights movement, but they don't hype up the Pan-African movement, which was everybody getting back up and moving to Africa, headed by Mr. Marcus Garvey himself, along with Mr. W.E.B. Du Bois and others. But I can go on for hours about this. Let's look at it like this, right? From what we've seen and known about history, the oppressed always goes above and beyond to protect their culture and where they come from, their principles, their way of life, so to speak. So why would we fight to adapt to your ways when we have ways of our own?
Now, I didn't know that this wasn't common knowledge. And if you didn't know this, that means you don't follow me. But white people have always indulged in cannibalism. They ate their slaves, and they ate black people that were free after the Emancipation Proclamation, after lynchings. If you didn't know this, you don't follow me. And if you don't follow me, you should follow me. My name's Chemistry. I teach Black history. I'm not part of Hillman Talk. I just do this for fun and out of the passion that I have for spreading Black history. And just like everything else on my page, I'm not just feeding you a bunch of bullshit. There are a plethora of books that you can look into that proves that this is a fact. Books like The Delectable Negro, which covers recipes of how to eat black people. Another book called Edible People, The Historical Consumption of Negroes and Foreigners, and I believe it was like The Cannibalistic Trade. And that's just two of many. But yeah, if you want to know more about the topic, if you scroll down on my page, I have a video called White People Ate Black People. It's very, very informative. So go ahead, learn you something. Follow me. I teach Black history. Also tap my link tree. I have a nonprofit, a YouTube, all that good stuff.
Accurate history is teaching white Americans how white slave owners raped, beat, humiliated, mutilated, murdered, and cannibalized their slaves. Accurate history is teaching that George Washington's false teeth were made out of his slaves' teeth. Accurate history is teaching that Abraham Lincoln may have said some words and signed some shit, but he did not physically do anything to free the slaves. The white abolitionists also often get almost total credit for freeing the slaves. I bet you've never even asked yourself what the slaves were doing to free themselves, and the answer to that is most of the fucking work, including giving the ultimatum of war. But then we get a bunch of white people mad that their kids might feel guilty if we teach real history. It's not about your white child's feelings. Teaching accurate history isn't about white people's feelings, but that does sound like something that someone who's only ever been taught a white glorifying version of history would counter with. Ask why we ever felt like we needed to curate a false version of what white people did and did not do to black people to begin with. And then ask yourself why white-ass politicians are verbally attacking real history by calling it slurs, which is, by default, also the act of calling black people slurs.
I have a theory about why black women and white women are having such a hard time getting along, and it starts with a story. When I first started teaching, I was in a teacher training program with 3 other women. 2 of them were black and 1 of them was Indian, and we started teaching at the same school, the same grade, at the same time. One of these women, a black woman, completely excelled. She did so much better than I did at literally everything. Classroom management, her test scores were high. She was excellent at literally everything. And something about her excellence didn't sit right with me. I just didn't feel good about it, and I couldn't figure out why I didn't feel good about it. It was internalized racism, but I didn't know that yet. So I had to sit with this idea of her being better than me and trying to figure out why it didn't feel good and feel comfortable for me. And of course, at the time, I didn't know that I needed to do the work of anti-racism, so I didn't think it was possibly because I could have internalized racism. I had to do a lot of study and thought about myself and what could possibly be making me feel this way about this woman. And here's what I discovered. most of the media that I had consumed up to that point in my life had white people as the central characters. And the shows and other media that I consumed that had white women at the central characters often had black women as the side characters. These black women's role in these movies was to assist the white women, support the white women, advise the white women, but never to rise above the white women. Even shows that were about black women, like The Help, had white women as the central character and the black women as supporting characters. So I internalized the idea that black women were there to support me and to advise me, but not to rise above or become better than me. And that's why when this black teacher was way better and more talented than me, I felt some kind of way about it. Now, I'd imagine lots and lots more white women have also internalized the same idea, and that's why they feel okay stealing black women's content and not giving them any credit, because the black women are just there to advise them anyway. But most black women are natural leaders. Society has forced them to become leaders. And so we need to step aside and let them lead. Even if it means checking our privilege and letting them lead us.
No way in the world that white people can free black people, because freedom is not white people's to give. Two, white people, as I said in the piece, cannot do for us what we refuse to do for ourselves. Whether or not whites like blacks or blacks like whites, I frankly have no interest in that at all. I have no interest in managed society. I'm not interested in having to sit next to people because they're white. I'm interested in being equal. And the only way you're equal is to have power. Not whether or not white people have been fair, not whether they're nice people, not whether or not black people are good or bad, but whether or not you as a community of people have the instruments of defense and in some cases of aggression to protect your turf and or your interests. You can't have 30 million people handing over to another people 100% of their resources and blaming them for 100% of their problems. That is not intelligent. So what we need to do in the black community is A, decide to be competitive. And the only way we're going to be competitive is to use our resources.
But once we get that understanding, we must still have a collective identity, because it has already been forced upon us and larger society. Because just like it doesn't matter if you're an African American from Ohio, from Mississippi, California, you walk into that store, there's a chance that you're gonna get followed around in that store. Same thing, you could be African, they gonna follow you around in that store. Your communities are going to have certain cultural traits as well. And so collectively, we need to hold on to.
So as a black person, we have to understand what the mission was. The mission was to de-unify the black community, because the stronger they come together, the more they come together, the stronger they are.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
When black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, then the black man will think like a black man, and he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together. And then at that point, you'll have a situation where when you attack one black man, you are attacking all black men. And this type of black thinking will cause all black people to stick together. And this type of thinking also will bring an end to the brutality inflicted upon black people by white people. And it is the only thing that will bring an end to it. No federal court, state court, or city court will bring an end to it. It's something that the black man has to bring an end to himself.
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you are doing great from wherever you're watching me from. I'm your host, and presenter Jintek Stories. Now, this is what I want to talk about. When you talk about white fear, this is specifically rooted in history, because over time, all these people have ever tried to do to black people is to sabotage the great things that black people have ever tried to do, right? And this has a negative implication towards black people, because you can start a race ahead of a person, and when they try to surpass you, again, you take them down, right? And this is what has been happening throughout the history. Now, this fear is rooted deeply in legacy of slavery, colonialism, and systemic racism. And this fear is not usually expressed overtly, but it's embedded in the institutions, media, narratives, and everyday interaction. Understanding the origins and manifestations of this fear requires exploring what is called guilt, what is called projection, what is called sustained effort to control and suppress black agency. Because black agency, it is something that is happening now, and we are seeing this as, they're seeing this as a big threat. They're seeing this as a huge threat, right? So we want to demystify all these things. Why do we see white people fear black people? Because this is inevitable. This is true. First, let's talk about historical guilt and fear of retribution. One of the deepest sources of fear stems from historical guilt white society carried for centuries of enslavement, exploitation, and humanization of black people. White Americans, for example, often fear that if black people were to gain full power or autonomy, they will seek revenge for the crimes of the past. This subconscious projection turns black liberation into a threat rather than a demand for justice and equality. And this is true, because this is what the oppressor thinks. If somebody really did oppress me, I will go get revenge. That's what they think, because they did the wrong thing. Now they're living with that fear, which is which is marked with a guilt. I also like to address the fear of losing power and privilege as another talking point that I would like to address. Now, the white supremacy has long been maintained through systems that ensure that white people benefit economically, politically, and socially. At the expense of black people, many white individuals fear the true racial equity would mean a redistribution of resources and influence. This zero-sum thinking, where one group gain is seen as another's loss, fuels resistance to policies aimed at correcting systemic injustices and frames black empowerment as a threat to white dominance. Yes, it's true, because if today we say that everything that black people built, black ancestors built today, if it were to be reverted back to the owner, we could have been visioning right now a lot of white people on the streets begging, asking, because inevitably black people worked, and it means that black folks owned resources. Right, they own the factors of production, but somehow, somewhere, these people overturned this, and the work that black people did was overtaken, and they took everything. I'm also going to be talking about media-driven criminalization. For decades, the media has portrayed black people, especially black men, as violent, dangerous, and criminal. These repeated images conditions society to associate blackness with danger. This has real-world consequences, from police violence to workplace discrimination and public avoidance. White fear is often irrational and manufactured, but it becomes real through social conditioning and fear-based storytelling. We've had a couple of people trying to say that, don't have a black person as your friend. They're going to threaten you, they'll do something to you, because they are pushing all this negative media-driven criminalization. And this is a deep-down subconscious projection of fear of greatness of black people, right? I'm also going to be talking about the threat of black excellence. White fear also arises from black success, whether in sports, music, business, or academia. When